What's up, booktube? It's Leah Cooper, and it occurs to me I haven't talked about books on this channel in a really long time. So I have a few videos that I've been thinking about filming to basically bridge the gap between the last time I posted a video, which was sometime in spring of 2022, until now, probably like yearly wrap-ups. But since it's the end of the year, it's December 27th when I'm filming this, I was thinking, why not just actually do a yearly wrap-up while everything you've read is currently fresh in your brain. So that's what we're here to do. We're here to talk about all the books that I read in 2025. I set my goal at 30 books so that my average would be like 2.5 books a month. I hit 27. I might hit 28 by the end of the year. I'll talk about that at the end of this video. But regardless of that, I think 27 books is still really respectable. My average page length, at least according to Goodreads itself, my year-end wrap-up, my average page length was 325 pages. So that tells me that I was actually reading a good mix of short and long works as well, which is always my goal. I also had a personal goal to try to read more nonfiction this year. I didn't succeed at that goal in the ways that I was hoping, but I succeeded at it in sort of other ways. And overall, I made more of an effort to read nonfiction this year. So it was a good first step. Most of my reading this year came from the library, either in the form of physical books or audiobooks. I think about 25% of my reading this year was audio. So I'll just be popping up a picture of the covers here if I don't own it. My average rating on Goodreads was 3. Pretty average. I didn't hate anything I read too much, but I also don't think I read anything this year that I would put in a top 10 list. So I'm just going to go through these in the order that I read them in this year. So the first thing I read was Saturation Point by Adrian Tchaikovsky. This is a science fiction novella. At the time, it was a fairly new release from him, but Tchaikovsky is so prolific. I think he's had like 2 novels come out just since this novella. This is a near future dystopian. It has elements in it that remind me a little bit of the Southern Reach trilogy by Jeff Vandermeer, set in a future where ecological disaster has raised the global temperature, along with like ongoing pervasive disease waves that mean people tend to be fairly isolated. Corporations have a lot of power, and there's a lot of money being thrown into scientific investigation into like making people more adaptable to harsher climates. This follows a scientist who's taken into, I think, the Floridian jungle in this zone of the United States that's no longer habitable, to try to find a lost researcher who was part of this work into trying to figure out how to survive at this really high humidity. I think now that I'm living in the Midwest and we go through a part of the summer that we call the corn sweat season, it's where temperatures are really high, humidities are already really high, and then the thousands of acres of cornfields around us will release moisture into the air, bringing the humidity up over 100% or something like it's, I guess over 100% would be raining, but like the humidity is so high that the real feel here will soar well into the hundreds, and it's awful. It's a really uncomfortably hot, miserable place to be during that part of the year, and it is a result of like a specific type of industrial agriculture that I don't think is very good for the environment. So this book was really interesting. I think I gave it a 4-star. The ending was a little bit cliche, but the world building is really interesting. The thoughts going into it are really interesting, and I love a good near future ecological disaster, capitalist corporate dystopian novel. After that, I read The Warm Hands of Ghosts by Catherine Addison. This is her World War I ghost story. This is another 4-star read for me. It is about a sister who is a Canadian nurse working during World War I. Her brother is a soldier. She has come back to Canada because she was injured overseas when she gets shipped her brother's like medals and jacket because he's disappeared. And he's not confirmed dead, and they won't tell her anything. So she goes she joins this like ladies auxiliary unit of not military personnel, but kind of like an independent nursing organization, goes back over there to try to investigate it. And it's a little bit of a devil on the battlefield story. And I thought it was very strange and a little bit surreal. The vibes remind me a little bit of Deathless by Catherine Valente, if you've ever read that novel, especially the part in Deathless that takes place during World War II during the Siege of Leningrad. I think it's a great read. We don't often get fantasy literature set in World War I. That was very interesting. The next thing I read was off my shelves, sort of. So this was a book I got out of a little free library at work, and it's a short story collection called Dragon Fantastic. This was first published in 1992. It was put together by Rosalind Greenberg and Martin Greenberg. From what I can tell, they seem to be a husband-wife duo that did a lot of like 80s, 90s short story collections. This has an introduction by Tad Williams. It has work by Alan Dean Foster, Tanya Huff, and Mike Resnick, just to name a few. Overall, I liked it. I think I gave it a 3.5 star. With every short story collection, there's obviously going to be some that resonate more than others. Couple that do stand out are the Alan Dean Foster. That one was really cool. It was like, they were like dragons who embodied different human vices. They were kind of like devils in that sense. And they were having a meeting to see who would be King Dragon based on how much like chaos and discord each of them was able to sow within humanity over the course of the year. There was another story in this collection that took place in like a near future idea of what modern society would be like, where there's this like holographic, I think it's a holographic home entertainment system that gets hooked up into this lady's home security system, and then it turns into a dragon rampaging and terrorizing thieves who try to break into her house, and she can't get it to turn off. That one was very interesting. It was a strange view of what like kind of modernist technology would look like from a 90s perspective. Overall, I really enjoyed reading this. This is kind of the quintessential old book that I just enjoy finding in like a throwaway pile or in a dumpster or in like a little free library where someone is effectively trying to get rid of it. Not throw it away, but they don't want it. No one else is willing to pay for it. I also listened to the second book in an epic, absolutely epic fantasy series. So I have been listening to Kate Elliott's Crown of Stars fantasy series. This is her epic masterpiece. She started in the 90s. The first one is called The King's Dragon. I listened to that last year. I listened to book 2, which is Prince of Dragons, and that was the first thing I listened to this year. I don't even know where to start with the series, but the theme is that most of the audiobooks I listened to this year were part of the series, and they got progressively longer and longer. I think this one was reasonable. This was probably in the 20 hours, around 600 or 700 pages. But let me tell you, those books did not stay that short. So this follows after the first book, where the king's bastard son is captured by this, they're called like Children of Stone, I think. And we don't find out till book 3 where they came from, if I remember correctly. I think it's book 3. These books are incredibly long, complex, sweeping, epic novels. Spread across those 12 or 15 viewpoints, we have anywhere between 6 to 10 different concurrently running plot lines, sometimes taking place in different realities and at different points in time. So it's a lot. Looking at my review of this book, I did give it 4 stars, but I do bring up the fact that there is a essay/sexual violence or threat of sexual violence plotline running through most of this series, especially in the early books. One of the primary POV characters, and really like the key protagonist of this series, she is essayed repeatedly in the first book by a character I really, really despise. She continues to be under the threat of sexual violence from him, even though she's growing and becoming more strong and powerful, even in just the second book. And I really hated that in the early books. His threat to her diminishes as the books go on. However, the threat of sexual violence is a running theme in this series. So I do have to like put that out there as a warning if you're thinking about reading it. There's essays, straight up essay, sexual assault being used as a power dynamic to threaten and abuse women is something that continues in honestly the rest of the series at varying levels. After that, I read another dragon book, and this one I own physically and I cannot find my copy of it and I don't know what I did with it. Maybe I put it in a little free library and I forgot. That is possible, and maybe I just don't remember. That is Tea with the Black Dragon by R.A. McAvoy. This is another one of those like classic of fantasy fiction from what I understand, like fairy tale fiction from what I understand. It was published in 1983. I would call it a novella, not a novel, because it's under 200 pages. And it's about this woman who travels to the city to meet up with her daughter. They're supposed to have this like weekend or week. Her daughter's worried about something, but when she gets there, her daughter never shows up and her daughter has disappeared. She runs into a mysterious gentleman at the hotel where she's staying, and he agrees to help her track down her missing daughter. And he is a dragon. Her daughter is embroiled in an embezzlement scheme that has to do with like computer databases and like bank information, I think. Like her daughter is like really into tech. It was not what I was expecting. Like none of those things are really what I was expecting from a book about a dragon. So it's very odd, very quirky. I didn't love it, but it is interesting. It has such a strange little encapsulation of early 80s computer technology. I don't regret reading it. After that, I read Spirit of the Wood by Kristen Britton. So this takes place in Kristen Britton's Green Rider series, which was another epic long fantasy series I was reading a couple of years ago. I've been waiting for the new one to come out, which did come out this year. I have not gotten to reading it, but this is a prequel story. I didn't love it. I don't know if it's because the problems with Kristen Britton's writing are easier to ignore when I'm listening to them on audio versus reading them, because I read this on ebook. But like there were too many things about her writing that do kind of in a general sense bug me. The cheesy bad character development, for instance. Or maybe this one's just a miss. I gave it like a 2.5 stars. I think it's a 2-star. That's like actually what I gave it on Goodreads. I described it as having bland two-dimensional characters, cliche and repetitive plotting, and described it as a far cry from The Dream Gatherer, which is another one of her novellas. And like, yeah, when I think about The Dream Gatherer, which is another prequel story about some minor characters, it is far better. This prequel is set, I want to say 20 or so years before the first Green Rider novel, and it follows Captain Mapstone when she is a captain during a period of strife in the kingdom in the North Country, when she is almost murdered and she gets the scar, and it's one of her like key defining physical characteristics in the main series. And it has to do with like her grief and another Green Rider joining the Green Riders. It doesn't really answer anything interesting. It doesn't give us like new information about Captain Mapstone, and she's not even the POV character. It didn't stand out to me as necessary to the series. I'm gonna say that. After that, I read another novella. This one was Murder by Memory by Olivia Waite. I think this was also a new release this year. This is a teeny tiny little science fiction novel. This was really fun. I do think I gave this a solid 4.5 stars. It takes place on, I think, a generational spaceship, and it's a murder mystery. There's this library where people keep an updated copy of their memories and their personality. So when they eventually age out, they can like rejuve themselves into a young body and have like a continual rebirth. Something happens, something goes wrong right at the beginning. Our protagonist has kind of been in cold storage. She's kind of taking a generation off, and she wakes up in a body, doesn't know why she's been put in this body, and there's been an accident in the memory archival. This was a nice, I would call, cozy detective mystery science fiction. I would highly recommend it, especially at just barely 100 pages. It's a fun, cozy afternoon read. I also read The Spirit Ring by Lois McMaster Bujold. This has been on my TBR for years at this point. Lois McMaster Bujold remains one of my favorite authors of all time. I've listened to most of her work up until this point, but this one I read physically. There was this thought in the back of my head, like, what if I don't enjoy reading her physically as much as I do listening to her stories? I did not need to be worried about that. I enjoyed reading it as much as I enjoyed listening to them. This is a standalone, so this is not set in any of her big universes. It's a fantasy, Renaissance, Florence style universe. So fantasy Renaissance Italy, about a young girl whose father is a magician and a sculptor and a craftsman. So kind of think like, not Michelangelo or even Da Vinci. Neither of those dudes had like children as far as I know. But like think Renaissance artisan with magic. And so he's making magical art. There is a bit of Da Vinci in him though, because Da Vinci had the Bronze Horse project, I believe. If I'm remembering my art history correctly, there was this like bronze horse that he cast and recast and wasn't quite ever completed. It was a project for a patron or something like that. I'm almost positive this was Da Vinci, but correct me down below in the comments if it was a different artisan and I'm getting them confused. Her father kind of has that project. Anyway, there is a coup on the local duke, who is her father's sponsor. Her father and the duke and a lot of the nobility are killed or assassinated. An extremely violent rival aristocrat takes over. Our protagonist escapes, and then she discovers that they have taken her father's body to bind his soul into a spirit ring, which would be an extremely powerful magical artifact, and she wants to save her father's soul and also save the city from this violent coup. And so she works with the local monastery that's headed by a man who, as a young man, was a soldier and a bit of a cavalier, and now he's like a man of the cloth. And she teams up with a guy who has just come to the city because he was actually coming to get a job from her father when like all of this happened. His brother was also killed in the coup, and they work together to try to save the city. This thing's delightful. It has a really sweet romance in it between the two characters. It is all of the keystone elements, the things I love about Lois McMaster Bujold, in an absolutely amazing fantasy setting, like fantasy Florence. I love it. I really do. If you want a one-off standalone fantasy, I think it's really great. I also read Don't Sleep with the Dead by Niamh Vo. This is another novella. I did read a lot of novellas this year. It was big highs and lows, like either very short works or very long works. This Don't Sleep with the Dead is a sequel to Niamh Vo's Great Gatsby fantasy adaptation, The Chosen and the Beautiful. I believe that's what it's called. This takes place a few years later. It follows Nick, and he is kind of on the trail of a devil he thinks might be Gatsby's soul back from hell. I think that's the best way to put that. And I loved this. In general, I would highly recommend, like, honestly, anything by Niamh Vo. I've never read a bad book from them, but I do think their Gatsby adaptation is great. It has some really interesting world building, and it leans into the queer elements of The Great Gatsby in a great way. Particularly this novella does as well. And it was a wonderful little story. Obviously, don't read it if you haven't read the first novel, though. After that, I kind of got a bee in my bonnet about romantasy. I wanted to do some genre research effectively, because this is a genre that really kind of exploded. It was like starting to become a thing when I was reading a lot. Sarah J. Maas was obviously like a big author with A Court of Thorns and Roses, blah, 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 blah. But like it's exploded into its own subgenre, even though I think, like, if we're talking academically about genre as categories, I don't think romantasy makes any sense. It's a marketing buzzword, but it's kind of nonsensical. That's my opinion of it. But I wanted to do a little bit of work researching it. I wanted to try to read some stuff that seemed to be clearly marketed as romantasy. That was my goal. So I picked out a couple of things from the library. The first one one of the only ones I actually read was A Dark and Drowning Tide by Alison Saft. Sorry, I'm having to read this because I don't remember names of people. This is a FF, so lesbian romance, fantasy. I would call it kind of an academic adventure novel. There is a prince of a kingdom who's sending 6 academic magicians to go find the fountain. And the fountain is like the fountain, it's a literal fountain, like water fountain. And it's like the source of magical power in this kingdom. So there's this element of like the fountain of youth, there's myth, right? There's this element of like searching for El Dorado, kind of. Not that there's anything about cities of gold, but just like that kind of mythos, searching for that kind of mythical place. Both of those things are kind of underpinning themes. We also have a protagonist who is clearly coded as being a Jewish religious minority. I don't know if Saft is writing from personal experience. I didn't research that. Or if that's just the character she chose. But that is also a key element. And I really liked the first half of this book. Like, surprisingly. Like, I was really jiving with it for the first half. It's, I think, broken up into 4 parts. And the first 2 parts are really good. I think the plot unravels completely in, like, the second or third part. I don't think the mystery is particularly good. I think the protagonist is kind of dumb, not very clever, and the romance is fine. I will give you that. I think if you are looking for a lesbian romance, you could probably do better, but you could definitely do worse. I think it's okay, but it's a 3-star. That's what I'm gonna say. While I was reading all of these things, I was listening to the 3rd book in Kate Elliott's Crown of Stars series, and that's called The Burning Stone. Okay, I had to look at my review for this one because, like, there's this shift that happens in the series and I'm trying to remember where it happens. It doesn't happen in this book. So basically, this book was a slog. I do remember reading it now. It's 800 pages, so it was a big jump in pages. Again, we have 12 to 15 points of view, a lot of different plots, all about politics, maneuvering armies, battles, etc. This one revolves around our primary female protagonist, Leith, marrying the king's bastard son, who is rescued at the end of book 2. Oh, spoilers? I don't know. Spoilers? It's a book from the 90s, come on. And them running away with a woman who reveals herself as Leah's mother, and her learning about magic. That's kind of one of the key elements of this book. This thing was a fucking slog. It just went on and on and on and on. And honestly, I was thinking about DNFing the series in this book until the epilogue. The epilogue is what got me. It introduced such a burning question about where the series was going, and I decided to keep reading. Now, ultimately, I am glad I kept reading because I think the series kind of goes like this and then goes like this in book 4. I think book 4 is definitely where things really pick up. How do you even tell someone to read 2,000 pages so that it can sort of pick up? And I'm going to say sort of pick up because the books are still incredibly slow, starting with part 4. But it enters these questions, these world building elements into the equation that get more interesting, that I want to see resolved, that I want to see where the author's going to take them. So book 3 is not the best. It's definitely like a 3-star read, but I got through it. After that, I read Beauty and the Goblin King by Lydia Foxglove. YouTube recommended me one of her videos and I watched it, and then I watched like every single video she'd ever made. So many things she says resonate so strongly with me. There's so many parallels. I've never been like Big 5 published, but our like self-publishing careers feel very parallel. So it was like really interesting hearing her talk about it, hearing her talk about her struggles, writing like to market versus having this project that's like the project of her heart. Anyway, that was really interesting. I decided to go ahead and read her first book from her self-publishing days, just out of curiosity. These are her like spicy fairy tale retellings. The first one is about the Goblin King. It's fine. It's not for me. I'm just like not into spicy books. I'm not into books that are pure purely romance novels. And I'm definitely not really into like spicy romantic novels. It's just not something I'm interested in reading anymore because my reading preferences have just shifted a lot in the last couple of years. As I think all of our reading preferences do. I give it like a 3.5 star. I think if sexy, spicy romance, fantasy, fairy tale book sounds good to you, check it out. There's nothing wrong with it. After that, I read a book for book club. So at my work, we started a book club. Unfortunately, it's very short-lived. We only did 2 books and we never had a meeting for the second book. So that's a bummer. But I read both books for the book club. The first one we read was Boys with Sharp Teeth by Jenny Howell. This is a dark academia, supernatural YA book. That's how I would describe it. It is not for me. It is for teenagers who really want to draw out every single moment of like brushing someone's hand accidentally. It's about a young woman who fakes her way into a private boarding school because her cousin was a groundskeeper or security guard there and he died mysteriously in the woods. Everyone says it's a suicide. She is convinced that it is one of the preppy kids that he was hanging out with who did it. And so she wants to expose them. It was very obvious who it was the whole time. There's like, the mysteries are just dumb. They're so obvious. There's no confusion. There's a death in here that felt really like it's supposed to be heartrending, but it wasn't built up very well. And the ending is dark. So like, I think if you've got a really emo, angsty teen who like really enjoys, I don't know, Gossip Girl, I don't know who this is. It's not for me. This is not for me. This is for really over emotional teenagers. And that's okay because it is definitely like a YA book. It is meant for a YA audience. And I'm not a YA audience. So I think it's succeeding in that way. I think I gave it like a 3 star. Like, it's fine. I also listened to the next Kate Elliott. And I think this is when I really started putting effort this year into trying to get through these audiobooks a little bit faster. So this is number 4. It's called Child of Flame. I'll pop the picture up right here. This one is 916 pages. So this audiobook was 38 hours. Very long. I gave it a 3.5 stars. This one has the first massive time schism, let's say. This book brought in so many questions. There's like, one character gets accidentally sent back into the past. One character skims the past and then gets sent into an alternate reality and then gets sent, like, travels across another alternate reality. And there's those 2 things bring up so many questions and implications about the world, about the history that were not satisfactorily answered. And for a 900-page book, that was frustrating. But I look back on it and I'm like, yeah, that was pretty good, to be honest. I was pretty entertained. This series is wild. I don't even know how to sell you on it. I mean, fundamentally, it's kind of like a 1000 AD style, like Middle English, early Catholicism inspired fantasy where you've got like lots of different kingdoms. You have a king. He feels a little bit like, kind of like the Saxon king, where he like controlled a couple different kingdoms and he wanted to create an empire, though maybe you compare him more to Charlemagne in that regard. And then you also have like fantasy creatures. So there's the rock children, who we do discover why they're humanoid but not human in this one. But I don't want to give spoilers about that because that's a cool reveal. We discover there's mermaids, dangerous mermaids. There are like goblins who live in the rocks. There's griffins, and there are sphinxes that we learned about in this one. There are spirits of the elements who live in the ether in like another plane, dimensional plane, outside of our dimensional plane. There's like all this really cool, interesting mix and mash of cosmologies here. And then, like I said, there is this race that we kind of think of as, I would say, analogous to like Fae. And I'm two books past this one, and I still don't know who was worse to who. There's this something, I don't know if I've missed it or if the author just hasn't been clear. The humans think that the Ashioi were like trying to enslave them. And then the Ashioi think that the humans just allied with the centaurs. Oh yeah, there's centaurs in this. I forgot to mention that mythical species. Just to try to kill them because humans and the centaur people are kind of hateful. And like there's no clear answer on who did what. Like the humans are claiming that the Ashioi were like performing human sacrifices, because I have read that Kate Elliott based the Ashioi off of the Mayans. But like we never see that, and the Ashioi themselves never talk about that amongst themselves. And so like I'm still so confused, because this is also like we're talking about a history that spans several thousand years, generations. Things have been lost, things have been buried by the church or forgotten. There's been cataclysms, right? Kingdoms come and go, empires come and go. And so I still don't have a definitive answer for like why these two groups are in conflict with one another. And I've read thousands of pages at this point. And so that was like one of my frustrating things with this book in particular, is I felt like this book should have answered that question, because it dances around the question. It literally dances around the question without giving a clear-cut answer. And that's intentional. But at some point I feel like she's got to give me an answer, right? Anyway, okay, I gotta stop talking about this book.